You're listening to the Big Three of B2B Leadership podcast with Mike Faherty, where world-class business leaders share their secrets for personal, organizational, and market growth. Gain powerful insights from industry leaders that have been tested by the fire.
Hi, my name is Mike Faherty. I'm your host of the Big Three of B2B Leadership. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by John Whaley. John is a strategic business developer and a growth project manager. And John works with entrepreneurs to turn ideas into actionable plans for growth. And I'm excited to visit with John today. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
Awesome. Well, first of all, did I get that right? Is that how you would describe yourself?
So, with the whole everyone's pivoting, it's very accurate, right? So it's work in progress. But for the most part, I've switched over to being project management on the business development side. So we're still working on the words, It's some people are like, what? But yes.
Yeah, getting the message right is
Yes.
always a tricky thing. I think I had a breakthrough yesterday on my message. I thought, well, maybe I am. Maybe there's a way I can improve that. So it's a constant battle, right?
Yes.
So you and I first met in 2017. I went through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. A really cool experience for anyone who's not familiar with Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business. There's, I don't know what you would call little, what would you call ours was done at HCC. So I don't know if you call them sites or whatever, but they're all over the country, right?
Correct. Yes. So it was just a peer-to-peer learning experience put on by Babson, and it's still going on to this day. I'm still part of the national team and the local team as far as facilitating classes. So, yeah.
So that was a really cool experience, something I really got a lot out of. I'd already been in business whenever I joined that for 6 or 7 years, whenever I went through the program. And there's an application process and an interview process. It's kind of I don't want to say rigorous, but they're selective, right? And so I was excited to be included in it. And I'll tell you one of my favorite thoughts or memories about that time was, the first day was like an orientation. And then we showed up for the second day and they said, okay, so today we're going to define our growth plan. And it was like, okay, hang on, what? Like, we're not going to ease into this, right? It's like, no.
Right.
We're going to pick the strategy today, and then we'll spend the next 6 weeks or no, it's longer than that, isn't it? It's like 12 weeks or something.
Right.
We're going to spend, the next few months working on it. And so there was something about that where you didn't get too caught up in the sort of intellectual battle about it. For me, I just said, well, if I was going to grow, what would I have to do? What is that thing? I've probably already thought about it. I probably already know what it is. My challenge is not coming up with the idea. The challenge is executing on it, which I think makes me think of you, right? And so that was one of the things that I remember you really pushed on. And so I want to talk about that a little bit first is, this idea of, look, ideas are cheap, right? The ideas are cheap. The real power comes in the execution.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about why you think that that's such an important point for entrepreneurs to understand?
So I appreciate it. So the reason I think the execution part is so important, I'm going on now my 40th year of being in, on, around, on, and through small businesses. So the one thing that I found over and over again is that so many people had great ideas. You brought in tactical experts that knew how to do everything from HR, social media, sales, everything, but it still never centered around the vision of the owner. It was always just someone coming in, making, their dream the owner's nightmare. And I just kept thinking, you wrote all these plans. When did you execute on it? And I always tell a story about my favorite character on TV growing up, and this dates me, but I already said I've been doing this for 40 years, was Radar O'Reilly from the MASH 4077 unit. Because of all the characters, there were funny characters, there was cool characters, there was noble characters, but Radar was that individual that got things done. And as a little kid, I'm sitting there like, the unit can't move without Radar. Klinger could jump in. Sure, every office has a Klinger, but Radar was that project manager. Really, he was the facilitator. He was able to understand all the resources, the people, the drive behind it. And so that stuck with me my entire life. And as I got older and dealt with bigger and bigger projects, more sophisticated endeavors, I realized the person who organizes and takes action is the one who gets it done. So that's how we moved to the point now of being a business development project manager. It's like everybody's got a great idea, but only a handful of people know how to get it done.
Right. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, but I want to now kind of backtrack some. So how did you get started in your business career? Like kind of what was first for you?
So I was blessed, fortunate enough to be born, or I was born here in Texas, but I grew up in the Midwest and grew up in a farming town that had a military Air Force base, a training base there. So I had the best of the rural life, but then I had the best of the international world around us. So you had to work. I mean, you kill what you eat what you kill, and that was pretty much it. There was, that's how you did it. So the family that I grew up in, we owned a lot of different businesses, from Honda dealerships to farming to we did corn and soybeans. We moved houses. You named it. We were a blue collar town, but we had the coolness of having an Air Force base there with people from all over the world. So first business was always deliver the paper. If you wanted that nickel or that quarter, then you mowed yards. Then next thing you know, my first big business was putting up Christmas lights because I saw it in the back of an entrepreneur magazine. Then we ended up building speaker boxes for the airmen. We knew they got paid on a certain day, so we'd run down to Menards and I'd buy a bunch of lumber and go to Radio Shack and buy a 15-inch subwoofer, and they'd bring their Camaros over. And for $500-600, I'd drill a hole, not knowing what I'm doing, stick it in the back of their car, and they drive off making lots of noise. So it just caught on and it never stopped from there. And so moving forward, I came to Houston thinking, the big city, I'm ready, and I thought I was going to play football, professional football. And as I was looking around, somebody pulled me to the side and they said, hey, looked in the parking lot, like, who do you want to be? So on one side, you had like Mercedes and Range Rovers and all this other stuff. And then the other side, you had like a Jeep, a Bronco, and some other stuff. I said, well, I'm more like the lineman than the defensive backs and the specialists. Long story short, I became a liaison / concierge agent, the radar behind the scenes for a lot of NFL and NBA players. So it was the build the business, grow the business. The mom, spouse, wife didn't want the business. Now I got to sell the business. And so from there, it just kept progressing, where I dealt with professional business owners. And then I joined SCORE. So for 10 years as a vice chair and in and out of all the different business organizations, I was with SCORE, and it was super fun. Next 10 years, from 40 to 50, I've been part of the 10KSB program, which we're celebrating 10 years now. So my entire life has always been in, around, on, and running small businesses. So that's
fascinating. One thing I noted when I was kind of going through some of your background and learning a little bit more about you in preparation for today, there's this theme of business advisory, but also this idea of education and service. It starts as far back as your resume goes. And so, you mentioned SCORE, or 10,000 Small Businesses. There's the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, even a little time in the mayor's office, right?
Yes.
Helping with business initiatives. So can you talk a little bit about why that's important to you?
So the goal was to figure out, how can I really help the small business owner? And this is kind of one of those, the chips on my shoulder, where it's like, if the business owners I grew up with had just known the following, right? And so it was always that search for what avenue could I reach the most business owners with this message of, here's what growth is, here's how it works. It's really simple. You're making it harder than it has to be. So in each capacity, in each organization or segment of the market, it was about, how do I leverage what they have to empower or really push that business owner that came to them for help move forward. And so, you try them all, then eventually you go back to doing what you do.
So how much of your time is spent in those sorts of projects and involved in those organizations versus, your private clients?
Yeah. So last year, this time, roughly right around this time, I relieved myself of duty as a business advisor with the 10KSB program, stayed on as faculty because I truly enjoy just being in that environment. It's like going to the state or national meet to be around everybody all at once. But now it's 24 hours a day, like it's 24/7. And really that work-life balance, I had a lot of goals for the big 5-0. And part of those goals were to live like the folks that raised me, which was you start a business, it gets you rich, but you take a lot of that money and you invest, and that makes you wealthy. And so that I spend my mornings, it just worked out. Today it didn't work out, that I spend my mornings flying, getting my pilot's license, going to get my instrument, then my commercial, so that I can go face to face with people in rural areas. More than anything now, it's investing in businesses. So clients don't pick me, I pick them, because I study the economics of how things work. So I'm less concerned with great ideas. I'm more concerned with which organization is positioned with the right leadership to say, here's where we just moved several $1 trillion. Here's who gets it. Here's what they're going to do with it. Are you positioned to take some of it or not? And so I try to split it out so that, especially with the kids home, because we have little ones or smaller ones now, that I get to spend the bulk of where most people are working, hanging out with family, going to the gym. And and then I get to some work at some point. And it's really not to be cavalier. It's just one of those things. I've worked so hard. I've always said, like growing up, a guy my age he would send us out to go spray for bugs or move a house or whatever. And he would go fishing. And I'm like, well, how does dad get to do all that? Well, he earned it. He was the one, he built this legacy of customer base, right? So I wanted to be that person that, and this goes back to everyone needs to be intentional about where they want this investment tool, their business, to take them. And I wanted my investment tool to allow me to drive out to the airport, park my truck in the hangar, jump in the plane, throw the family in, go somewhere, land, COVID or no COVID, have a great day, get on the phone, change somebody's life through their business, how they run their business, come home that same day and eat dinner at 7. So it was like, yeah, I just seen examples of it. And that was the whole, like, I don't want to be the person bragging about, I got 150,000 miles on United and I never see my family. I just didn't want to be that guy.
That's cool. I took pilot's flying lessons, I guess. And I soloed. And so I did more than mess around. But I soloed, and then I came back and I went, well, I feel like I checked that box, and then I just moved on. I never did it again. It's funny. I don't know if maybe I had babies at home and wife was pregnant, and I thought, I don't know if this is the right thing for me right now, but it's funny because maybe I'm going to go back to it someday. So you've inspired me to kind of spend some time thinking about that, because it's the freedom that it affords is pretty amazing. Yes.
And I can tell you, for me, the business part of it is on autopilot. Like, there's nothing to figure out when it comes to business. It's like there's demand, and then there's people who can pay, and there's people who can't. You meet the demand or you don't. That's the whole game in a nutshell, right? So it was like when I give business advice or counseling, people want to make it so complicated, like, oh, mission statement and all this other stuff. I'm like, okay, great, but I can't help you with that because you're making it harder than it has to. Flying was the only thing that made me feel alive still. Like, everything else was just like, just nod off. And so when I'm in the plane, I'm like, this is new. I don't know what I'm doing. There's so many new things. Every day my brain is like, wake up, wake up, wake up. Because when I get into a business environment, it's just straight autopilot. I mean, even if we're doing research. So that's what it did for me.
So when you talk about visiting businesses and working with business owners and they make it harder than it needs to be, what are some of the things that you see them doing where they're making it harder than it should be?
So I will say the biggest hurdle for small business owners to cross as of late is really that number 2 person in their organization should not be their number 2 person. When I sit in meetings that are team meetings and I have the owner and their number 2 and number 3, and that person is fixated or, like, we'll say, hey, we want to grow our business. Well, growth in my world just simply means we're either going to push the revenue up, the profits up, or our returns up. Anything else is an expense. I don't care what you throw at me. If we're not moving those north, you're just wasting money, right? The initiatives have to be that. And we'll get into these meetings, and then they'll turn to their number 2 and like, what do you think? And the number 2 will say, well, I already do that. Well, I already know how to do that. I do social media. I do this. I do that. I don't know why this guy's even here. I mean, I'm like, And they literally spent their entire PPP and everything else keeping this person around. That was a detriment to their company, but it's someone they can trust, they're familiar with. It doesn't matter if it's a spouse, a friend, but that is the number one leading cause of death or slow death of small businesses. Out of I think I'm going on 6,000 businesses that I've had the opportunity to sit on their kitchen floor in their office with them, is that like they literally give that person full run. Anyway, I'll stop there, but that's the number one cause of death for small business owners. And for the folks that are by themselves, it's that whole inability to realize that the business is an investment tool. And if they want to use it as to prove their passion or purpose, or use it as some type of medium to express, that's cool. But that's really hard to scale, and it's really hard to turn into some type of cash cow. And so those people, the problem becomes they focus on their ego rather than the ego of the market. Like they're more concerned with how can the business help me versus how can my business help that individual that has a need and has the ability to pay me. And if I could just position myself right, I could get that money. So yeah, those are the top two.
So just kind of spending a little more time on that idea, I think my experience has been that through sheer dogged determination, just about anyone with a decent idea who's really, really committed, in 3 to 10 years can build a couple $1 million business if they just put everything they've got into it. But that's different than what you're talking about. You're talking about having an investment vehicle. So how do those people move through that glass ceiling, if you will, and kind of break through to the next level where they can build a 10, 50, $100 million company? It sounds like to me, part of your answer is going to be, hey, you got to get a good team, right? That guy that you're counting on to help you get there may not have what it takes to do that. What else is there that keeps them?
Yeah, when it comes to like if somebody said they want to grow a business to X dollar amount, then we're looking at the returns, right? You're not even looking at revenue. So on the returns part of growth, if we take on a project, if someone says, hey, this is what I want as exit or whatever, that is strictly about your leadership skills and your network. Again, most people who grind for decades just eventually fall in the laps of people who have. Right? I don't care where you go in the world. The only way you make it is your friends have money. I don't care if it's because your spouse paid your way for the while, or somebody died and left you some money, or you had enough to grind, or you just went to the right school. Of the 120,000 businesses just in Houston, the ones that made it, they were connected, or eventually they got connected. Everybody else is just grinding, going to workshops, right? So it's this crazy notion of, if you want to grow your business, I always say network up. Like, sure, you can do all that social media, but if you sit on the Economic Development Council, if you sit with the investors in this area, when that money comes down the pipeline, you're either there making the pie or you're begging for a piece of it after we've already put it out on the street. And that's the trick to scaling a business. I don't care. You could look at anywhere in the world you go, it's about how close you are to those at the top. The operations, like when people start talking about the mechanics behind the business, what they're really saying is we're looking at profit, right? Because profit is nothing more than your operations and your finance. And so how lean can we get to squeeze out the revenue that's coming in? How cheap can we pay for the money for the assets? That's it. When you want to grow it, you're either running with the folks who have money or you're not. I mean, that's really the whole thing in a bucket. That's why you can get the smartest people ever came out of Rice, MBAs, blah, blah, blah. All they'll ever be good at, because they don't have a network, is holding down a $100,000 job and going on trips and bonuses, which is cool, but they're not going to scale up anything. You could take somebody with a third grade education who's so-and-so left them so-and-so, and they know so-and-so, and someone's going to make a call for so-and-so, and the next thing you know, they got a $115 million contract. That's how it's been since I can remember back the beginning of time for me. And that's how it is now.
So how are you specifically helping entrepreneurs with that? Are you making those connections? Is that part of the value that you bring?
Oh, absolutely not. So now part of the prerequisite is when we vet, you have to already be connected, but don't know how to leverage what you have. You have to already have the mindset that you want to grow in one of the three categories. You have to already be looking at, this is my investment tool because I left XYZ company and we poured all this money in it and we want our money back out of it. So there's a long checklist that took me years of sitting through meetings with people and realizing this conversation is not going to go anywhere because you are fixated on things that I can't help you with, right? So that goes back to why I'm constantly looking around and listening like, okay, this person sounds like they got a head on their shoulder. They've got some corporate experience, or maybe they understand enough about finances, or they really are that type of person that they get the market. And that's how I end up choosing and selecting. But the rest, I just send to any number of programs or workshops because they're still learning. They're still trying to figure it out.
Right. What's your take on bootstrap businesses? Do you think that's, I'll just leave it there. What are your thoughts on bootstrapping as a strategy for growing a business?
So when it comes to bootstrapping a business, it goes back to, it doesn't matter if you start with $500,000 that your dad's friend wrote for you to start your business, or if you start with the last $13 on your credit card. If you did it because it's in your heart and you think you thought you felt you saw a market, okay, great, good luck. There's nothing I can tell you. Let's just see how it's what I always say, it's like the sperm and the egg. A billion sperm go out, one egg is sitting there, and the one that lands turns around and starts writing books on how to be great. Doesn't negate the other 999 million sperm that didn't make it. They were trying just as hard, just you landed first. So it comes back to the whole, when you're bootstrapping, what you're really saying is you're going to go to the profit section, you're going to start lean, but you have to connect to a group that has demand. Like there has to be a need, whether they know it or not. I guess every time I'm going to town, because now I'm a burb kind of guy. I go into town, I see a homeless person on the corner, and I'm thinking, boy, if they don't understand demand, now that's bootstrap right now. They know which corner, at what time, and which vehicles to approach. Whereas, a small business owner would be like, I read this in a magazine. I just went to a workshop. I was with my peer group. This sounds amazing. And then they run out the door and start it. And then after burning through money and all this other stuff and building websites and just burning cash like maybe it's the market. Maybe it's the president. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's not meant for me. And then I hire a coach and then that coach comes in with corporate advice about it's the numbers, it's the this, it's the that, and blah, blah, blah. It's like you weren't paying attention to the market, like period. All this pivoting people are doing right now with COVID. It's like how many wake up every day and watch Bloomberg, CNBC, read the journal, following like major companies that are telling you these people are about to be fired. We're switching to AI here. Our new distribution chain is here. Our new logistics chains are here. I don't know, because most small business owners are at networking groups now begging for contracts, and they are completely out of the economic side of it.
What are, I think there's been a really interesting opportunity, and I don't know if a lot of business owners have taken advantage of it. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I want to get your take on PPP and what I think might have been a missed opportunity for a lot of business owners in getting access to capital that might have been difficult for them to get access to before, to fuel growth rather than just to survive. What do you think about that? Have you seen examples of people really leveraging that and doing good things with it, or maybe the opposite?
So I've seen more of we took the money, we have zero plan of what we're going to do with it, but it's there. And I agree. I really feel, had there been a plan in place, had people been looking outward rather than inward, because I think with most people that I encountered, it was, I got to take care of my employees. I'm like, okay, that's true. Yes. Great. Okay. But you can't bury your company, your family, like your employees, family, friend, whatever it is. You hate to see them go, but it goes back to, they held on to number 2 and number 3 way too long, because out of the guilt of their heart, not realizing this is a machine. This thing is, if you run it into the ground, everybody's going with you. So I just don't think people really thought it through, right? And so now I have so many individuals like I'm running out of money and I thought there was going to be another stimulus or I still got people talking about, I got another grant. I'm like, well, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. Like, wow, okay. Like, so there's very little prep. There's a lot of vultures out there circling, tell them how now's the time to start doing all kinds of expensing out some stuff. It was a golden moment for a lot of small business owners to really pivot. If you were a number, in the small business world, if you were number 8, 9, or 10, and you weren't in that top tier bracket where you had your market locked, this was your time to attack. And no one taught them to attack. So they kind of just sat there.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a business owner really early into that process who said that they had 12 employees. They've been in business for 20 years. They were, they were doing a couple $1 million worth of business, and life had been pretty good for the last 20 years. Things were just kind of moving along for them. And then this happened. All their contracts dried up. They had no revenue. They got PPP funds, and I said, what's your plan? What are you going to do? How are you going to grow? How are you going to replace your customers? They said, well, right now our plan is to keep the money. And if I can keep the money, I can keep everyone on staff through January.
Yeah.
I'm like, what happens in January? Well, I don't know. Then we'll have to make some tough decisions.
Yep.
So, obviously what you're saying is make the tough decisions now.
Yeah.
Deploy that capital to stimulate growth, to make new connections, to win new deals, and then hire extra people in January, rather than, or hire those people back in January if that's
right.
what it takes. If you had to make some tough calls, and I feel like there was a lot of missed opportunities right now as I talk to business owners. And I think it's unfortunate.
And being in that circle, we all had a lot going on, right? Especially if you had schools closed down. Right. Will this stuff kill you on the spot or not? The amount of no information, misinformation, somewhat information really made it hard, which is why markets lock down. Like uncertainty breeds like no productivity. So for so many small business owners, I go back to, 20 years of just thinking about small business owners specifically. And like, no one ever taught them to be a small business owner. We taught them to be an employee. If you look at any business course, it's literally the same thing taught in the 60s about a business course. Well, when we stopped hiring, we changed to small business owner, just changed the words and took the same management material. Same people wrote the books. And then when small business owners couldn't get a loan, then we changed it to entrepreneurship and hand out the same information about how to work well in your business. Small business owners don't spend enough time talking to the investment community and the money community. That's why I always said, if you're in business for money, why'd you start a business? You should be out there trading and moving money around. But most people start a business to express themselves. They do not start a business as an investment. And that's just what I've seen over the years.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting perspective, that they started a business to express themselves. Is that how you would categorize the sort of technical founder? Would you put them in that category as someone whose their idea is so important to them to create that they're going to go and create it, whether there's a market for it or not?
On the inventor side, that one I would kind of give a little more, that's more market driven, right? So you work for an organization and you have what you think is going to be awesome, but bureaucrats and structure block you. And so you go to your garage and you start building because there's a demand. You've seen it, but you can't. That's different than, like, I've had folks that, they had some miracle paint that you could draw on and all this other stuff. There was no demand. They just thought it was a good idea, right? Like, it's like if you invented Post-its or you invented whatever they said NASA invented. So with the small business owner, the technical person, it's 50-50, right? Some leave because they want to prove that they're smarter than the rest. The other leaves because they know if they could get this to market, it's going to take off.
Mm-hmm. What's your take on business education today? I know you got an MBA. Do you think that traditional business education is serving the business community well, or do you think it doesn't matter that, a decent idea and hard work is probably all that's necessary?
Good question. So it depends on what your intentions are. I always, so the cornerstone of what I do is vision, clarity, and direction. That's what we do as project managers on the biz dev side, right? So you have a vision. I'm going to clear it up, and then I'm going to point everybody in the right direction to reach your vision. So when it comes to the MBA, the reason I appreciate it so much, especially in this time, this age, when everybody is really wrapped up in their feelings and they'd rather be comforted than realize, let's look at reality, right? So the MBA for me at 40 plus, after years of being in business, gave me the structure to sit down and scale up bigger and bigger deals. So now I could sit in a meeting with a BlackRock group and say, cross my leg and hold up my Rolex and flip it over and do whatever they do in these New York meetings. And, well, I feel that the fiscal responsibility and talk the talk. So like, he talks the talk. Okay, so we've made progress. The PMP was really about, if there's a framework that my neighbors can get a pool put in, they can lay miles and miles of road, they can take a spaceship up and back, all of it led by a project manager. Yet a small business owner can't do something as simple as build a business, make some money, and not be stuck there all day. Like, what's the breakdown? Well, there's no one to facilitate as a project. And so the project management part jumped in, giving me the framework to complement the ability to do the research as an MBA. I don't think it's failing. I think it's just like with doctors, physicians, and anything else. Just because you have an education, if you don't have a way to apply it, meaning you don't know where it fits, you just learn the stuff. It's like flying an airplane. I'm very, very into what I do, but I can tell most of my CFIs are like, yeah, I'm just trying to get the hours, eventually go to airline or something. As their passion is just getting to the airlines. My passion is staying alive, having a good time. Totally different reason why I absorb all this material, right? They do it for a check ride. I do it because it's like, this stuff's so fascinating. I want to learn how to apply it under different circumstances. But MBAs are just like anybody else. If you find somebody that has enough experience and knowledge to apply it, rockstar framework. If you find somebody who just checked the box and got a degree, well, they're going to give you a lot of big words.
Mm-hmm. So when you're working with a founder or a CEO and they're desperate to elevate to owner,
mm-hmm.
right? What are some of the steps? What are some of the steps that they need to go through? What are some of the milestones they need to hit or boxes they need to be able to check so that they can get to that owner status?
Yeah. Good question. So the way I run it, workflow here is individual says to me, like one of the examples I give is your business is your sports team. And when we sit down and have that conversation, you got to tell me whether or not you want to win or you want to make money, because we can't do both at the same time. And people say, well, Johnny, that don't make sense. I'm like, no, let me help you out here. Okay. If I'm building a winning football team, winning, that means I'm burning cash like there's no tomorrow. I'm getting the best players, the best coaches, the best. It costs a lot of money to build a championship team. That means I'm probably going to take a loss. But what that does is that increases my overall value of the team. So without the championship, my team was worth $500 million. With the championship, my team's worth $650 million. I lost money, but I grew the value of the business on the open market. The flip side of it is you want a team that makes money. I get the cheapest players. I get the user experience that's through the chain. I got a $300 million team that the next year barely is worth $290 million, but I earned over $30 million a month while the team was in session. So I made a boatload of money to go buy more dealerships and more salt mines and things like that. And so you cannot, even with a small business, expect to, that's why they say it takes money to make money. You're not going to build a winning company and make money at the same time. When you build a winning company, you're looking at the exit strategy, the return on it. When you build a cash cow, you're looking at, hey, it ain't got to be perfect. It's just got to run. And so getting that business owner to say, hey, Johnny, I don't want to be the quarterback, the star player anymore. I want to be the coach. And I'll say, okay, well, to make you the coach, we need a playbook. And not just some pie in the sky you grabbed off an Acme business plan. We need an actual offensive team, defensive team, special units, all this stuff. And so at that point, we start doing the business case of what project we'll build first. And for most small business owners, and especially on the founder side, we're looking at that. How do we build their leadership resources? Like, what do you need that you can walk away that people aren't thinking to themselves, he said this the other day. Oh, great. He went to another workshop. He's coming back with more stupid ideas. Oh, great. He just got a new consultant. Here comes some more dumb stuff. Oh, no, that's great. Yeah. When do you want us to implement that awesomeness? Yeah. You're really fired up. Oh, traction. Right. So getting them into a place where now they have a playbook that can be a coach. And then the next thing we do is we start looking at assets or resources that we can build that allow that person that is now the new star player for them to become the coach so that that business owner can become the general manager, right? And because at that point, if you own a business and your number one can manage that business and either make you win or just keep fans entertained, you're in a good spot. Now you can go worry about things like deals and TV contracts, and you can worry about that operation side of it. Then you find an individual around you and we start building assets for that allows that owner / manager to move from GM to the actual owner. And so we just slowly progress them from the star player who's taking every hit, who can't find somebody smart enough to do what they do, to moving them to the coach, where now they eventually got special team coaches and their job is to empower the people. We then bump them up to the manager, where now they're at a point where their coaches know how to hire coaches. They're dealing with the numbers, and eventually they become the owner, where they just show up in the skybox and brag about how awesome their team is. And so it's not an overnight thing, but it's all mindset. There's nothing to teach them. It's getting them to stop thinking like the worker bee. And I go back to, if you hang around enough finance folks, you will learn quickly how not to think like a worker bee.
Right. That's fascinating. I love the analogy of the sports team, because that really does make a lot of sense. And I think there's a lot of business owners who run around and they are the quarterback, and they're convinced that no one else can throw the ball as well as them.
Right.
And part of it is letting go, and also being okay if you're Peyton Manning, it's okay if there's someone who's a rookie with less potential. If he can still get the job done and run the play, right? If he can to use the sports analogy, if he can be a game manager, that might be all that's required right now. He doesn't have to be an all-world quarterback, right? A game manager can get it done and allow you to go to the next level and start working on that.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up out of the whole coaching, mentoring, advising, consulting, all that stuff, and just went straight to the project management and the biz dev side of it. Because if I can get a small business owner to just pause for a minute and say to themselves, how do I empower the person below me and build a system that is sustainable? I don't care if you have a cash cow where all you got to do is make $180,000 a year, or you are trying to build some multi-million-dollar company. The mechanics are always the same. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, hey, I really appreciate the conversation. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me today and sharing your insight with us. Hey, John, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So I encourage everyone just to go to LinkedIn. It's under Johnny Profit, JonyProfit. Or if you just Google EE Hour, right, it'll pop up. Because right now I'm in my twilight. I'm so just like, we walk the lake and stuff every night. I'm doing all the stuff I dreamt about as a kid, right? I'm living that life. But I'm always here. People can reach out. Email wise, it's JW@EE Hour. You just, you can put it in the notes and you just reach out, say you heard me on Mike's show, and then we can go from there.
Well, perfect. I'll absolutely put your information in the show notes. So if anyone's listening right now, just go to prosalesconnection.com/podcast and you can find a recording of this and all the links that John mentioned. Look, really, I want to thank everyone for listening, and thank John for your time today. I really appreciate that, John.
Thank you.
And remember, folks, that B2B leaders grow B2B companies faster when they're focused on the big three. All right. Y'all have a great day.
Take care.
Pro Sales Connection is a sales and marketing firm that has been helping B2B companies grow faster since 2009. Learn more about our proprietary fastest path to revenue process for B2B companies. Experiencing the possibilities begins with a short 15-minute call. Schedule yours at www.prosalesconnection.com and click Get Started.